Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Brizuela, and this is the Marin County Vegetation Management Plan to lower wildfire risk. This is Marin County in California. It's just north of the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, and it has multiple open spaces and wildlife refuges. The vision is grass being greener, skies being bluer, and all creatures in Marin being able to breathe easy. The goals and objectives for this plan are to reduce fuels, focusing on invasive plants, protect wildlife and their habitats, maintaining water and air quality standards, and increase public outreach. And there are many alternatives to getting this done, including mechanical vegetation removal, manual removal, prescribed burns, grazing animals, herbicides, defensible space creation, reforestation with resilient species, and we'll be incorporating a mix of these. So to create shaded fuel breaks along roads and property lines and upwind of communities, we want to remove unhealthy trees with small diameters, invasive trees. We want to remove branches up to a third of the tree's total height, and retain the large fire-resistant and native trees. We want to remove dead vegetation and debris except in critical habitat areas. We want to align fuel breaks with existing features like roads, trails, and power lines. We want to utilize agencies like the California Conservation Corps. We want to hire those local grazing animals for larger areas over 5 acres. And when we do this, we want to maintain a database with all the dates and the areas that we worked on. Some strategies for administering prescribed burns in the rainy season is utilizing agencies like the National Forest Service and local tribes because they have experience with this. We want to identify high fire risk areas with models. We want to obtain approval from the air quality control districts and local fire departments. We want to monitor weather conditions throughout the day that we're planning, notify nearby landowners, residents, local emergency services, and local PG&E so they can release statements, ensure all personnel are properly trained before working on the project, avoid sensitive habitat areas, and we want to monitor post-burn for hotspots and reflash to prevent a wildfire. And we want to maintain a database with the total acres burned and the dates that we've prescribed burns. For private land, we want to provide burn permits for landowners. We'll have to create a standardized burn permit application form and process, determine the permit conditions like time of year that they're allowed to, hours of the day they're allowed to, and acceptable materials to burn. We want to require certain procedures to be followed, like maintaining a certain distance from structures, using certain fuels and not others, and having firefighting equipment nearby. We want to include a non-liability statement for us, for the landowner to sign. And we need to offer educational resources and provide local firefighting agency contact information. Before we issue a permit, we need to notify local firefighting agencies, and we need to be able to revoke permits due to any non-compliance. We need to be maintaining a database for permit applications that are issued, denied, and revoked. And we'll also keep a database with the total amount of burns and or acres burned. It's really important to prevent erosion, especially on slopes and when we're removing vegetation. So we want to maintain tree canopy cover while thinning vegetation to keep the soil from drying out. That's why we're only going to go a third up from the bottom of the tree. We want to retain deep-rooted vegetation. That's why we're retaining those larger trees. We're going to cover the ground with mulch or wood chips after removing the vegetation to keep it moist. We're going to plant native grasses and shrubs where vegetation was removed. And we're going to avoid using heavy machinery on slopes. Try to go for manual vegetation removal as much as we can. To maintain air and water quality, we are going to obtain permits. And before we do that, we are going to identify the project areas that are near bodies of water, near threatened and endangered species, and near communities. We're going to identify appropriate local water and air management agencies, as well as local tribes. We're going to keep track of timelines for submission and approval to make sure everything happens correctly. And we're going to monitor and report compliance, keeping detailed logs with time-stamped photos every time we finish something with the project. Before getting started with anything, we need to monitor the threatened and endangered species nearby. So we're going to identify the species in the areas, identify where their nests, dens, breeding grounds, and migratory areas are, identify the times of day and the times of the year that the wildlife are most active during. We're going to utilize GIS to map this all, and we'll be consulting with wildlife conservation agencies like U.S. Fish and Wildlife and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, so we can train and educate personnel to identify and avoid wildlife and their nests and dens. Once we identify them, we will be marking off those critical habitat areas with high visibility tags and monitoring those species abundance before, during, and after the project. One of the overall goals is to increase the ratio of native to non-native plant species. So when we remove vegetation, we're going to be focusing on those invasive species, and when we revegetate, we're going to be only seeding with native species. So we're going to identify and map those invasive plant areas and native plant areas using GIS pre-project. And then after the project, we will also be remapping those areas. Increasing public outreach, we're going to educate residents on plants that are fire resistant, drought tolerant, pollinator friendly, and have deep roots. So we're going to utilize pre-made fire safe plant lists, pollinator friendly plant lists, erosion resistant plant lists, drought tolerant plant lists, and native plant lists to create one cohesive list segregated by the type of plant. So flowering plants, fruiting plants, grasses, trees, and shrubs. We're going to include tips for growth like growing season, watering schedule to help landowners plant those plants and grow them. We're going to be coordinating with local pollinator conservation groups, plant nurseries, fire safe groups, HOAs, and the Civic Center to distribute those materials. We're going to be translating those materials into all the most commonly spoken languages in the county. And we're going to feature fire safe gardens in local blogs, magazines, and social media if we can. And for local events, we're going to give away those seeds as a prize. Another aspect of public outreach is educating residents on defensible space maintenance and encouraging residents to manage their vegetation. So we're going to be educating on pruning techniques, irrigation techniques, and how to properly space out plants. We're going to educate on those different defensible space zones. We're going to be handing out materials with images for reference and translating all materials into the most commonly spoken languages in the county. We're going to be coordinating with local fire safe agencies to provide free or discounted home assessments on defensible space. And we're going to be coordinating with HOAs to also distribute those materials. And we will also use social media, newsletters, blogs, especially when wildfires are already making headlines, to try to get more engagement on those posts. For success criteria, our reference point is when we start the project. So increasing the number of fuel breaks created or maintained, increasing the number or square footage of invasive plants removed, increasing acres burned, increasing burn permits issued, increasing the number of public outreach hours, handouts given, and online post engagement, and increasing or keeping the same the ratio of native to invasive plants by number or square footage, and threatened or endangered species habitat by area, species abundance by number. And we want to decrease the wildfire risk via those modeling applications that determine wildfire risk. Here are the plan's references.